Sharon Osbourne breaks silence after Ozzy Osbourne's death. Just 9 days after the death of her husband, Ozzy Osbourne, on July 22, 2025, Sharon Osbourne has finally broken her silence in an exclusive and deeply emotional interview that reveals the most intimate, shocking, and heartbreaking details about the final chapter of their legendary 43-year marriage. Speaking from the couple's Buckinghamshire home where Ozzy passed away, a visibly transformed Sharon has shared revelations that will forever change how the world understands their relationship, Ozzy's final months, and the profound love story that played out behind the scenes of one of music's most turbulent partnerships. What she reveals about their last conversations, Ozzy's hidden fears, and the secrets they kept from the world will leave you speechless. Sitting in the same room where Ozzy spent his final weeks, surrounded by decades of memories and mementos from their extraordinary life together, Sharon appears, simultaneously devastated and strangely at peace. Her famous strength and resilience seem tempered by a vulnerability that she rarely showed during Ozzy's lifetime, when she was fiercely protective of both his image and their family's privacy. "I've spent 43 years being Ozzy's manager, his protector, his voice when he couldn't speak for himself," she begins, her voice steady, but her eyes filled with unshed tears. "But now that he's gone, I need to be his widow, his best friend, and the keeper of his real story. The world thinks they knew Ozzy Osbourne, but they only knew the character he played. I'm the only person who knew John Michael Osbourne, and I owe it to him, and to everyone who loved him, to tell the truth about who he really was and what we really went through together." The first shocking revelation comes when Sharon discusses Ozzy's final months and how different they were from what the public believed. Everyone assumed that Ozzy was fading away, that the Parkinson's was stealing his mind along with his body. But the truth is, his final year was the most emotionally intimate time we ever shared as a couple. The disease had taken away his ability to perform, to travel, to maintain the larger-than-life persona that had defined him for so long. But it also stripped away all the barriers he had built around his heart. For the first time in our entire marriage, I had my husband's complete, undivided attention. If you're already moved by Sharon's honesty, please hit that like button, because her next revelations about their private life will absolutely break your heart. Sharon reveals that Ozzy's final year was marked by what she calls the Great Reckoning, a period when he systematically addressed every relationship, every regret, and every unresolved issue from his 7 decades of life. He became obsessed with making things right, with healing old wounds and expressing love to people he felt he had taken for granted. It was like he was preparing for the most important performance of his life, his death, and he wanted to make sure he got everything right. She describes how Ozzy spent hours each day writing letters, making phone calls, and having difficult conversations with people from every era of his life. He reached out to childhood friends he hadn't spoken to in 50 years, to former bandmates he had feuded with, to employees he felt he had treated poorly during his worst periods of addiction. He even tracked down some of the doctors and nurses who had saved his life during his various overdoses and medical emergencies, just to thank them personally. He said he needed to clear the ledger before he left, to make sure he wasn't carrying any unfinished business with him. Sharon's voice breaks as she continues. "One day I found him on the phone with a roadie from the 1970s, who he had fired in a drunken rage 40 years ago. He was crying as he apologized, trying to explain that his behavior had nothing to do with the man's work and everything to do with his own inner demons." Sharon's most emotionally devastating revelation concerns how Ozzy dealt with his guilt about the impact his lifestyle had on their family. "The hardest conversations were about our children and the ways his addiction and erratic behavior had affected them. Ozzy carried enormous shame about not being the father he wanted to be, about the times when drugs and alcohol were more important to him than his family's well-being. He would lie awake at night remembering specific incidents, missing Kelly's school plays because he was too drunk, embarrassing Jack in front of his friends during his wild periods, not being emotionally available when the kids needed guidance and support. What destroyed me was watching him try to apologize to our children for things they had forgiven him for years ago. Kelly, Jack, and Amy had long since made peace with having an imperfect father who struggled with addiction, but Ozzy couldn't forgive himself. He kept saying, 'Sharon, they deserved better. They deserved a dad who was present, who was stable, who put them first.'" Oh. No matter how many times I told him that his love had always been clear, even during his worst periods, he couldn't let go of that guilt. Sharon pauses to wipe away tears, her hands trembling slightly as she recounts these painful memories. Sharon reveals that Ozzy's relationship with his own mortality was far more complex than anyone realized. People assumed he was fighting death, desperate to hold on, terrified of what was coming. But the truth is, Ozzy had made peace with dying long before his body started failing. What he couldn't make peace with was the idea of leaving us without ensuring we would be okay. His biggest fear wasn't death, it was that his death would destroy the family he had spent his life trying to hold together. The most shocking disclosure involves Ozzy's final weeks and how he spent them preparing for Sharon's life without him. He became obsessed with making sure I would be financially secure, emotionally supported, and free to build a new life after he was gone. He would spend hours with lawyers and financial advisors, restructuring our assets and investments to give me maximum flexibility and independence. But more than that, he was trying to give me permission to be happy without him. Sharon's composure finally breaks completely as she recalls these conversations, her voice becoming almost inaudible through her sobs. Sharon breaks down as she describes their most difficult conversation, which took place just weeks before Ozzy's death. He looked at me one morning and said, "Sharon, I need you to promise me something. When I'm gone, I need you to fall in love again. I need you to find someone who can give you all the stability and peace that I never could." I was furious with him for even suggesting it, but he kept insisting. He said, "You've spent 43 years taking care of me, managing my chaos, cleaning up my messes. You deserve to spend the rest of your life being taken care of by someone who has their life together." I told him he was crazy, that I could never love anyone else, that he was the only man I'd ever wanted. But he said something that I'll never forget. "Sharon, our love is strong enough to survive my death, but it's also strong enough for you to love someone else without betraying what we had. I want you to be happy more than I want you to be faithful to my memory." That conversation broke something in me because I realized he was trying to set me free, even though it was tearing him apart to do it. Sharon reveals that Ozzy's final months were also marked by an intensive period of creative output that surprised everyone around him. Despite being so physically weak, his mind was more active than it had been in years. He was constantly writing songs, poems, letters, observations about life and death. He told me he felt like he was downloading everything he had learned in 76 years, trying to capture it all before he lost the chance. Some of his final writings were the most beautiful, profound things he had ever created. She walks over to a desk covered with handwritten pages, picking up one of the notebooks Ozzy had filled during his final weeks. She discloses that among these final works was a collection of love letters addressed specifically to her, which he had been writing secretly for months. After he died, I found dozens of letters hidden throughout the house, in my jewelry box, tucked into books I was reading, even taped under the bathroom mirror where I do my makeup every morning. Each letter was about a different memory we shared, a different aspect of our relationship, a different reason why he was grateful for our life together. Reading them has been both the most beautiful and most painful experience of my life. Sharon shares the contents of one particularly moving letter that Ozzy had written about their early relationship. He wrote, "Sharon, do you remember the first time I told you I loved you? I was so drunk I could barely stand, covered in my own vomit, and you were helping me get cleaned up after another disastrous show. I looked at you and said the words, but I don't think I understood what they meant until years later. I thought love was about passion and intensity and drama. But you taught me that real love is about showing up, day after day, even when the person you love is at their absolute worst. You loved me when I was unlovable, and that saved my life in ways I'm still discovering." She continues reading from another letter, her voice becoming stronger as she shares Ozzy's words. He wrote about our wedding day, about how terrified he was that I would realize I was making a mistake and run away. He said, "I kept waiting for you to come to your senses and leave me for someone more stable, more reliable, more worthy of your love. But you stayed, Sharon, through every crisis, every relapse, every public embarrassment. You stayed, not because you had to, but because you chose to." That choice, made over and over again for 43 years, was the greatest gift anyone ever gave me. The most emotionally devastating revelation concerns Ozzy's final day and the conversation they shared just hours before his death. He had been mostly unconscious for the previous 24 hours, but around noon on July 22nd, he suddenly opened his eyes and asked me to sit beside him. His voice was so weak, I had to lean in close to hear him, but his mind was completely clear. He told me he could see his mother and father, that they were waiting for him, and it was time to go. Then he said something that will stay with me forever. "Sharon, I need you to know that despite everything, all the chaos, all the mistakes, all the pain I put you through, these 43 years with you have been the happiest of my life. You took a broken boy from Birmingham and helped him become a man worthy of love. I'm not afraid to die because I know I've been truly loved, and I know I've truly loved in return. That's more than most people get in a lifetime." Sharon reveals that she spent Ozzy's final hours reading to him from letters they had written to each other during their courtship in the late 1970s and early 1980s. "I found a box of our old correspondence that we had saved from when he was touring and I was managing his career from London. Reading those letters, full of young love and big dreams and promises about the future we would build together, seemed like the perfect way to send him off. He couldn't respond anymore, but I could see tears on his face as I read. Even at the very end, he was still the romantic who had swept me off my feet all those years ago. The most shocking revelation involves what happened in the moments immediately after Ozzy's death. When he took his last breath, I felt this overwhelming sense of relief. Not because I was glad he was gone, but because I could feel his suffering end. For months, I had watched this vital, energetic man become trapped in a body that wouldn't cooperate with his spirit. When he finally let go, it was like watching him escape from a prison. There was this incredible peace in the room, like all the struggle and pain just evaporated. Sharon discloses that in the hours following Ozzy's death, she experienced something that completely changed her understanding of their relationship and her own future. "I was sitting with his body, just talking to him like I always did, when I suddenly felt this overwhelming sense that he was still there with me, just in a different way. I know how that sounds, but I felt his presence so strongly that I actually looked around the room expecting to see him. And in that moment, I understood that our connection wasn't dependent on his physical body. The love we shared was bigger than life and death." She reveals that this experience has fundamentally altered her approach to grief and her plans for the future. "I'm not trying to get over Ozzy's death or move on from our relationship. Instead, I'm learning to carry our love forward in a new form. He's still my partner, still my best friend, still the person I want to share everything with. The only difference is that now I have to do all the talking." Artist Sharon describes how she continues to have conversations with Ozzy daily, updating him on family news, asking for his guidance on important decisions, and even arguing with him about practical matters. "People might think I'm crazy, but I swear I can feel his responses. When I'm struggling with a decision about the foundation we established, or about how to handle his musical legacy, I'll feel this sudden clarity about what he would want me to do. When I'm sad or overwhelmed, I'll suddenly remember something funny he used to say that makes me laugh. He's still taking care of me, just from a different dimension." Sharon's most controversial revelation involves her plans for the future and how they've been influenced by Ozzy's final wishes for her life. "Ozzy made me promise that I wouldn't become a professional widow, that I wouldn't spend the rest of my life just managing his memory and living in the past. He wanted me to continue growing, changing, experiencing new things. He said, 'Sharon, you're only 72 years old. You could have 20 more years of adventure ahead of you. Don't waste them mourning me.'" She discloses that she has already begun making significant changes in her life that would have been impossible while caring for Ozzy. "I'm selling most of our houses and keeping only the one in England where we were happiest. I'm stepping back from managing other artists and focusing entirely on the charitable foundation and preserving Ozzy's musical legacy. I'm even considering writing a book about our relationship. Not a celebrity memoir, but an honest exploration of what it means to love someone through addiction, fame, and ultimately death." Sharon reveals that one of the most challenging aspects of widowhood has been learning to make decisions without Ozzy's input after decades of partnership. For 43 years, every major decision was made together. Even when Ozzy was at his worst, struggling with addiction or mental health issues, I would still talk everything through with him because his perspective was so important to me. Now I have to learn to trust my own judgment, to make choices based on what I think is right, rather than what we would have decided together. She discloses that this independence is both liberating and terrifying. There's a freedom in being able to make spontaneous decisions, to change my mind without consulting anyone, to prioritize my own needs and desires. But there's also this constant feeling of being unmoored, like I'm operating without my most important compass. Ozzy was my partner in everything for so long that I sometimes feel like I'm learning to be a whole person on my own for the first time. Sharon reveals some of the practical challenges she's facing in the immediate aftermath of Ozzy's death. Yesterday, I was trying to decide what to have for dinner, and I realized I had no idea what I actually liked to eat. For 43 years, I've been cooking what Ozzy wanted, ordering what would make him happy, choosing restaurants based on his preferences. Now I'm standing in the kitchen, completely overwhelmed by the simple act of feeding myself because I don't know what I want when it's just about me. She shares another poignant example. This morning, I woke up and my first instinct was to check on Ozzy, to see how he was feeling, to plan our day around his needs and limitations. When reality hit, that he's gone, that there's no one to check on, I just sat in bed and cried. Not just because I miss him, but because I don't know who I am when I'm not taking care of him. Being Ozzy's wife and caregiver wasn't just what I did, it was who I was. The most moving part of Sharon's revelations involves her reflections on the true nature of their legendary relationship and what she wants people to understand about their love story. The media always focused on the drama, the breakups, the reconciliations, the public fights, the addiction struggles. But what they missed was the deep friendship that was the foundation of everything else. Ozzy was my best friend before he was my husband, and he remained my best friend through every crisis and celebration we shared. People ask me how I stayed with him through the addiction, the arrests, the public embarrassments, the health scares. The answer is simple. Underneath all the chaos and dysfunction was a person I genuinely liked and respected. Ozzy was funny, intelligent, compassionate, and loyal. Yes, he was also troubled and sometimes destructive, but the essential person was always worth fighting for. I never stayed with him out of obligation or duty. I stayed because I genuinely enjoyed his company and couldn't imagine my life without him in it. Sharon reveals that one of Ozzy's greatest fears in his final months was that their relationship would be remembered primarily for its difficulties rather than its joys. He worried that people would see our marriage as an example of dysfunction rather than resilience, of codependency rather than partnership. He wanted people to understand that despite all our problems, we had created something beautiful together. Not just a family and a career, but a genuine partnership that enriched both our lives immeasurably. She discloses that she is now committed to ensuring that their love story is remembered accurately and completely. I want young couples to understand that real love isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone worth fighting for, and then doing the work to build something meaningful together. Ozzy and I went through hell together, but we also experienced incredible joy, deep intimacy, and unconditional support. The struggles were real, but so was the love. Sharon shares details about the overwhelming support she's received since Ozzy's death, which has both comforted and surprised her. I've received thousands of letters and messages from people around the world, many from fans who've been following our story for decades. But what's moved me most are the letters from other wives and caregivers who understood the unique challenges of loving someone with addiction and mental health issues. They've made me realize that our story wasn't just about celebrity drama. It was about the universal human experience of loving someone through their darkest moments. One woman wrote to tell me that watching how I stood by Ozzy gave her the strength to stay with her husband through his own addiction recovery. Another said that seeing our relationship survive so many crises helped her believe that her marriage could survive her husband's depression. These letters have helped me understand that by being public about our struggles, we accidentally created a roadmap for other couples facing similar challenges. Sharon reveals some of the more personal artifacts she's discovered while going through Ozzy's belongings. In his bedside drawer, I found a folder labeled Sharon's Strength that contained newspaper clippings and magazine articles about me from throughout our career. Not about us as a couple, but specifically about my business decisions, my television work, my advocacy for various causes. He had been secretly collecting evidence of my accomplishments for years, like he was building a case for why he was proud to be married to me. In another drawer, I found a notebook where he had been writing down things I said that made him laugh, little observations and jokes I had made over the years. Some of the entries were from just weeks before he died. Even when he was so sick, he was still paying attention to the little moments of joy between us, still finding reasons to smile in our conversations. Sharon's final revelations involve her message to Ozzy's fans and her hopes for how his legacy will evolve now that she's his primary guardian. Ozzy belonged to his fans as much as he belonged to our family. He understood that his music and his story had become part of other people's lives, helping them through their own struggles and celebrations. I want to honor that connection by ensuring that his real message about survival, resilience, and the power of love continues to reach the people who need to hear it. She reveals that she is working on several projects designed to preserve and extend Ozzy's positive impact on the world. We're establishing a treatment center that will provide free services for musicians struggling with addiction and mental health issues. We're also creating an educational program that will teach young people about the realities of fame, success, and the importance of maintaining mental health in high-pressure environments. Ozzy's struggles can serve as cautionary tales, but his recovery and growth can serve as inspiration. Most importantly, I want people to understand that Ozzy's story doesn't end with his death. The love he shared, the music he created, the people he helped, all of that continues to ripple out into the world. He may be gone, but his influence on the people who loved him will keep growing and spreading for generations to come. Sharon concludes her emotional revelation with a direct message to Ozzy, spoken as if he were still in the room with her. "Darling, if you can hear me, and I believe you can, I want you to know that I'm going to be okay. It's going to take time, and there will be days when I can barely function without you, but I'm going to honor your final wishes by building a life that makes you proud. I'm going to love our children and grandchildren with the same fierce devotion you showed them. I'm going to protect your legacy while also living my own life fully, and I'm going to carry our love story forward, not as something that ended when you died, but as something that continues to evolve and inspire. You were the love of my life, my business partner, my best friend, and my greatest adventure. Thank you for 43 years of chaos, laughter, music, and unconditional love. Until we meet again, I'll be here holding down the fort and making sure the world knows who you really were underneath all the headlines and controversy. You were simply the most extraordinary ordinary man I ever met, and I was blessed beyond measure to share this life with you." As Sharon wipes away her final tears and looks around the room that still contains so much of Ozzy's presence, she adds one last thought. "People always said we were an unlikely couple, the proper English manager and the wild rock star, but we weren't unlikely at all. We were inevitable. From the moment we met, we recognized something in each other that completed what was missing in ourselves. That recognition, that completion, that's what real love is. And death can't touch that. Death can take the body, but it can't take the connection. Ozzy and I are still connected, still partners, still in love. The form has changed, but the essence remains." If this incredibly intimate look into Sharon and Ozzy's final chapter has moved you as much as it has moved us, please show your support by hitting that like button. Sharon Osbourne's courage in sharing these private moments reminds us that behind every public love story is a deeply personal journey of growth, forgiveness, and unconditional commitment. Her revelations prove that true love doesn't end with death. It transforms, deepens, and continues to inspire everyone fortunate enough to witness its power.